All cops are liars. That's what my old man used to say. And sure, most of them are just doing their job. But there are some bad apples. A small percentage of cops are actually sociopaths. They got into law enforcement not to serve the community, but because they like having power. You know, being able to pin crimes on people without solid evidence, beating confessions out of them, putting their hands on the bars for 20 years for something they didn't do. Yeah, those guys really exist. One of them is haunting my nightmares these days. His name was Richard Ramirez. He was a cop with the NYPD, assigned to the 10th Precinct in 1983 when he became famous. The whole city was going crazy over the murder of a woman named Alicia. She was an 18-year-old girl who had been stabbed to death in her apartment on the Upper West Side. Her doorman had let 3 men into her apartment building. They were looking for her specifically, and when they found her, they brought her downstairs, took turns raping her, and then killed her. The police couldn't find the guys, though, so they started looking for another kind of perp, someone who might have hired those goons to do the dirty work for him, and that's where Ramirez came in. He was a family friend of sorts. He knew Alicia from hanging around her brother and sister. So we went to see them and told them that he was also there the night Alicia was killed, that he was hanging around with some friends when suddenly these 2 guys ran up to them and said they needed help getting rid of a body. Ramirez said that he and his buddy then helped transport the body to the roof of the apartment building where the guys had thrown it out the window. According to Ramirez, those 2 guys were the killers, but he wasn't involved. The thing is, the story made sense. It checked out, and Ramirez was so darn convincing that the brothers believed him. In fact, they told the police that Ramirez had nothing to do with the crime, but Ramirez was already under investigation by Internal Affairs. Apparently, he had a history of beating up suspects and making them confess to crimes they didn't commit. So, even though the brothers insisted that Ramirez was innocent, he was still brought in for questioning, and once he was in the station house, it was all over. Ramirez confessed to the whole thing, right down to the part where he and his buddy helped dispose of the body. He even agreed to take the cops to where he hid the murder weapon. And wouldn't you know it, there was no weapon. Of course, Ramirez was arrested and charged with murder. He lost his job, got sentenced to 25 years in prison. But here's where things get weird. After he was convicted, other women started coming forward saying that Ramirez had assaulted them, too. So the DA brought more charges against him. But after they dug through his history, they realized that he had been doing this kind of stuff since 1978. There were at least 20 victims they could link him to. So now he's serving 400 years in prison, 100 for each of his victims. All the evidence against him was circumstantial, but the cops knew he was guilty. I mean, how could he have made all those stories up? Well, as it turns out, Ramirez was a total maniac. He loved the attention. He liked hearing himself talk about catching criminals and saving the day. And he was really good at it. Years later, the chief of the department that Ramirez worked for called him the best actor he'd ever seen. Maybe that's why he never showed remorse or asked for forgiveness or tried to appeal his conviction. He knew he deserved every second of those 400 years. If only my old man had known that cops could be sociopaths, maybe he wouldn't have trusted them so much. Maybe if we stopped believing cops, the world would be a better place. I used to think that cops were decent people, that they were heroes. But nowadays, not so much. Cops don't bring me justice, they bring me nightmares. The night was as dark as the secrets Detective Harding buried deep inside him. Rain lashed against his trench coat, each drop exploding into a million tiny stars on the cracked pavement. The neon lights of the city reflected in the puddles, painting grotesque grins on the indifferent faces of the buildings. He was close. He could feel it in his bones. Tonight would be the night he finally caught the architect, the mastermind behind the string of brutal murders that had shaken the city to its core. For months, the only clues had been strange calling cards left at each crime scene. A calling card that mocked the police with its gleeful illustrations and nonsensical rhymes. But they were finally onto the architect. They had traced the paper used for the calling cards to a small stationery shop, a shop the architect frequented. And yesterday, they had gotten a hit on the security cameras outside the store. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Harding followed the grainy image of the man on the screen. his heart pounding a tattoo against his ribs. He found him at an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. The same man from the security footage. The same man who had become the stuff of nightmares for the residents of the city. The architect. Harding moved closer, adrenaline surging through him, his hand hovering over the gun at his hip. He knew this dance. He'd played this part many times before, the predator stalking its prey. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, the prey was a monster. He burst through the door, gun drawn, and the architect turned, a manic grin splitting his face. "Ah, Detective Harding," he said, his voice like nails on a chalkboard. "I was expecting you." He gestured to the room behind him. "Please, come in. We have so much to discuss." Harding hesitated, his eyes taking in the room. It was a sick joke of an art studio, paint splattered everywhere. Easels with half-finished paintings leaning against the walls, and in the center of it all, a large canvas stood propped open, an unfinished masterpiece. Or was it a doctored photograph? Harding squinted. In the dim light, he could make out two figures, a man and a woman, their heads eerily familiar. He took a step forward and the architect took a step back, his grin widening. "Do you recognize them, Detective?" he asked, his voice dripping with amusement. Harding frowned, trying to focus on the painting. Something about it was vaguely familiar, but he couldn't place it. "Who are they?" he asked, his voice tight. The architect leaned closer, his breath hot on Harding's ear. "Don't you recognize your own wife and daughter, Detective? The ones you failed to protect?" Harding recoiled as if struck, his eyes widening in horror. The figures in the painting were indeed his wife and daughter, their smiling faces frozen in time. But how did the architect know? The architect stepped back, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "You see, Detective, I know everything about you. I know what makes you tick, what scares you, what turns you on." He paused, savoring Harding's shocked expression. "And I know you'll do anything to protect your reputation, even if it means sacrificing your soul." Harding stared at the painting, his mind reeling. Was this real, or was the architect playing some twisted game? Was this meant to break him, to corrupt him? The architect clapped his hands together, the sound echoing in the vast space. "Well, then, Detective, I'm afraid it's time for you to make a choice. Join me, and we can rule the city together. Or resist and watch as everything you love turns to ash." Harding felt his resolve crumble like sand through his fingers. Was this the end? Would he succumb to the darkness that had been clawing at him, trying to pull him down? What would it take to stop the architect? The rain outside suddenly seemed like a distant memory as the warehouse creaked ominously in the wind. "I'm a police officer. I've been with the department for 18 years. I love my job. It gives me great satisfaction to know that I'm protecting the citizens. I live in a small town where everyone knows each other, so I've known most of the people I've arrested several times throughout my career. Most of them I've grown up with. Actually, everyone thinks they know me. They know that I'm a good guy, a family man, a church-going person. They don't know that every night I go home and I do terrible things. No one knows this, not even my wife or my kids. I keep it a secret because I'm afraid if they knew what I did, they would hate me. It all started when I was a rookie. Back then, I used to get freaked out by everything. Any little noise, any little shadow, anything like that, it would scare the hell out of me. One night I was patrolling downtown and I heard a noise coming from an alley. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear this blood-curdling scream followed by heavy footsteps. I froze. My heart started pounding in my chest. Then I heard it again. The scream and the footsteps. Curiosity got the best of me, and I slowly approached the noise. I turned the corner and I saw the most horrifying thing I've ever seen in my life. There was a man standing in the middle of the alley. He was tall and thin, and his skin was white as snow. But the most terrifying thing about him was his eyes. They were completely black, soulless. I screamed. The man screamed and took off running. I gave chase, but he was too fast for me. I could hear him breathing heavily behind me. I could feel his hot breath on my neck as he whispered in my ear, "You can't run forever." I turned around and I tackled him to the ground. We struggled for a moment, but eventually I was able to get the upper hand. I handcuffed him and I called for backup. When the other officers arrived, they were shocked. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. A man who appeared to be from another world. At the station, we couldn't get the man to talk. He wouldn't tell us his name or where he was from. He just kept staring at us with those soulless eyes. The chief brought in a priest, but even he couldn't get the man to talk. Eventually, we let him go. We didn't have anything to hold him on. He disappeared into the night and was never seen again. After that incident, I was never the same. I couldn't sleep at night. I would toss and turn for hours. I would look at the shadows in the corner of my room, and I would see his face. I became obsessed with finding him. I spent every waking moment searching for him. I went through every case file, every police report. I wanted to find him so I could ask him one question: where are you from? Then one day I found something. I found a witness who had seen the man enter a church. I went to the church, but when I got there, I was told that the man was dead. He had died under mysterious circumstances. I never found out what he was or where he came from, but I do know this: he's out there. And sometimes at night when I'm trying to sleep, I can hear his heavy footsteps outside of my window. I can hear him breathing down on me as he whispers in my ear, "You can't hide forever." And then I wake up in a cold sweat. It's just a dream. I tell myself, it's just a dream. But in the back of my mind, I know that one day he'll come for me, and when he does, there's nothing I can do to stop him.